The storm rolled over Harrow Creek like a great heaving beast, swallowing the last traces of dusk. Detective Aaron Cole tightened his coat as he stepped out of his truck, his boots sinking into the mud outside the abandoned Pike Farm. The old barn loomed against the horizon, black, skeletal, whispering with the wind. For 50 years it had been a ghost on county records, the Pike Sisters long vanished from public memory. But tonight, the farm pulsed with something darker. 37 men were missing across 5 states, and all clues, every breadcrumb, every desperate family plea had led Aaron here. He approached the barn slowly, flashlights slicing through the rain. The wooden boards were warped, nails rusted, windows boarded shut with metal plates. Only one door remained unlocked, hanging crooked on its hinge. Aaron pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit him first: rot, iron, chemicals. He gagged and forced himself forward, careful not to disturb the scattered equipment on the floor. Broken cages, shattered glass vials, tangled wires, and strange electronic devices hummed faintly, as if running on dying batteries. A metallic clink echoed from deeper inside. Aaron froze. His hand slipped toward his holster. Another sound followed, a low, guttered moan. Not animal, human. His pulse surged. He moved toward the sound, boots crunching on gravel. The deeper he went, the colder the barn felt, as though the earth itself was swallowing the heat. He reached a trapdoor hidden beneath filthy tarps. A steel padlock lay sliced open beside it. Someone had beaten him here. Maybe minutes ago. He lifted the trapdoor. The stench of damp stone and old blood crawled up the ladder shaft. His flashlight beam trembled as it revealed a descending tunnel of brick and metal beams. Every instinct screamed to call for backup, but he knew time mattered more. The families waiting for answers had waited long enough. He descended. The tunnel branched into a corridor lined with heavy doors, metal, reinforced, the kind used in clandestine facilities. He felt chills race down his spine. The Pike Sisters were supposed to be eccentric farmers from the 1950s, 2 quiet women who kept to themselves. What kind of farmers built an underground maze beneath their barn? He pushed open the first door. A man lay slumped in chains, wrists rubbed raw, eyes half open but conscious enough to flinch at the sudden light. Aaron rushed to him, checking his pulse. Alive. Barely. "It's okay," Aaron whispered, cutting the chains with the bolt cutter he carried. "You're safe now." The man's cracked lips trembled. They're still here. The sisters? They never left. Before Aaron could ask more, a loud clang echoed from the far end of the corridor, something heavy, something metallic, something moving. He steadied himself and headed deeper, freeing more men, each cell holding another broken soul. Some cried. Some stared blankly. Some whispered the same thing over and over. They're not human anymore. When Aaron reached the final chamber, he understood why. The room was enormous, machinery buzzing through the walls. Tanks of murky liquid lined the edges, each containing diagrams, organs, strange tubes that suggested medical experiments far beyond anything legal. Papers littered a desk, records of injections, DNA mapping, neurological manipulation. The Pike Sisters weren't running a farm. They were conducting experiments, and the missing men were subjects. Footsteps echoed behind him. He spun around, gun raised. A woman stood in the doorway, white hair hanging in tangled strands. Skin pale as wax, but eyes sharp, intelligent, disturbingly calm. "Detective Cole," she whispered, her voice cold and echoing off the concrete walls. I wondered when someone would finally follow the trail. Aaron recognized her immediately. Agatha Pike, reported dead in 1973. "You should be in your grave," Aaron said. She smiled slowly. "Oh, but science changed that." Something moved in the shadows behind her. A second figure emerged, her sister, Miriam Pike, equally lifeless-looking, equally wrong. Erin stepped back. Where are the others? Where's the rest of the missing men? Agatha tilted her head. You've met some of them already. But the final chamber. You haven't opened it yet, have you? Before he could react, she pressed a button on the wall. The floor beneath Erin shifted. Panels slid, ears rumbled, and a section of the wall groaned open, revealing a cavern beyond. Erin's breath hitched. Dozens of men were chained to the stone floor, their bodies thin, bruised, trembling. The sisters had arranged them in rows like livestock. Tubes ran from machines into their arms, monitoring, measuring, draining. But the most horrifying thing wasn't the setup dot. It was the writing on the wall behind them, scratched in frantic, bleeding lines. They're evolving. We're next. Aaron raised his weapon. Let them go, now. Miriam stepped forward, her movements unnaturally smooth. Detective, you misunderstand. We saved them. We prepared them. They are part of a larger plan, one you cannot stop. The lights flickered. The machines surged. The men in chains began to convulse, gasping, screaming. Their bodies reacted as unknown chemicals pumped through the tubes. Aaron ran toward them, cutting the nearest restraints. Agatha shrieked, "You'll ruin decades of work." Aaron ignored her. One by one he freed as many men as he could, dragging them away from the machines. But the floor shook again, this time from something deeper. Something alive. The lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Aaron's flashlight flickered back on just long enough for him to see something terrifying, shadows shifting behind the pipes. Something crawling along the ceiling. Something large. The sisters' voices rose in eerie unison. The experiment must live. A roar shattered the silence. Aaron grabbed the nearest man and ran toward the tunnel. Behind him came screams, Agatha's, Miriam's, and something else, something monstrous. He didn't look back. He pushed the weakened men up the ladder, one by one, hands shaking from adrenaline. From deep below came the sound of metal ripping, walls collapsing and wet, violent tearing. When the last man reached the top, Aaron climbed after him, slamming the trapdoor shut just as something slammed into it from below. He stumbled out of the barn into the storm, helping the survivors toward his truck. His radio crackled, a live dispatch calling for updates. He couldn't speak. He couldn't think. All he could hear was the pounding from beneath the barn floor, a pounding that grew softer, then stopped. By the time backup arrived, the barn was silent. The underground chambers were collapsed, flooded, sealed by fallen debris. No sign of the sisters. No trace of the creature. 37 men were taken to hospitals. All were alive, though many could barely speak, their eyes hollow with unspeakable memories. Aaron stood by the ruins of the barn until dawn, the storm clearing into gray morning light. He stared at the charred wood, listening for anything beneath the earth. Anything at all. But there was only silence. Yet he knew, he felt it in his bones, that the Pike sisters hadn't died that night. They hadn't been crushed by collapsing tunnels or devoured by their own creation. No, they had escaped. And somewhere out there, the experiment lived on. 2 months passed before the nightmares returned. Aaron sat in his apartment late at night, reviewing case files, when a soft tapping echoed at his window. He looked up sharply. Rain slicked the glass, but something else was there. An envelope stuck to the pane with a long, thin needle. His heart thudded as he opened the window and retrieved it. A single sheet of paper lay inside. A photograph. One he wished he'd never see. It was the Pike barn, except it was rebuilt, reinforced, lit from within. And outside the barn stood 2 figures, Agatha and Miriam Pike, smiling, eyes gleaming in the camera's flash. On the back was a message written in an elegant, chilling script. We weren't breeding. We were preparing. And we only need 37 more. Aaron dropped the photo, his breath frozen, his pulse roaring in his ears. He grabbed his gun and badge, sprinted to his truck, and radioed command. But even as he sped into the night, deep down he knew the truth. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore, it was a race. Because somewhere in the dark countryside, in some forgotten corner of the state, the Pike Sisters had risen again. Their experiment had survived. Their subjects had evolved, and now they were hunting, not just for strangers, but for him. Aaron drove faster, headlights slicing through the empty road. The storm clouds gathered once more, and thunder cracked across the horizon. The wind howled like something alive, and somewhere far behind him, or perhaps far ahead, he heard an echo rising through the storm. A metallic clang, a familiar moan, a low, hungry growl that didn't belong to any human at all. The nightmare wasn't over. Aaron drove through the storm-soaked night, with his pulse hammering against his ribs. The road ahead twisted through the empty countryside, but he barely saw it. The photograph of the rebuilt barn sat on the passenger seat, rain dripping from its edges. Agatha and Miriam Pike stared up at him from the glossy surface, smiling that impossible, knowing smile as if they had been waiting for him to open it, waiting for him to understand that everything he believed he destroyed 2 months ago was only the beginning. His radio crackled. Detective Cole, please respond. We received your emergency alert. What is your location? He hesitated. Something deep inside him whispered that he shouldn't involve anyone else. Not yet. Not until he knew what he was facing. Dispatch, I'm pursuing a lead. I'll update once I confirm. Detective, protocol requires. He switched the radio off. He needed silence. He needed to think. He needed to breathe, but the photograph kept drawing his eyes. The barn, new, reinforced, brightly lit, was not in the location he raided 2 months ago. The land around it was flatter, the tree lines familiar, but not identical. The Pike Sisters hadn't rebuilt it in the same place. They had moved, hidden, planned, and they had left the photo for him to find proof they were alive, proof they were watching. The road split into two. Aaron slowed, heart pounding as he replayed the background of the photo in his mind. The angle of the hills, the silhouette of a windmill, the faint outline of a power station. These details narrowed the search. He turned left, heading toward the old industrial district near the state border. Few people lived there now. Most had moved away as the factories closed and the fields dried up. Perfect territory for people who needed isolation. Lightning slashed the sky, illuminating vast stretches of land. And then he saw it, at least he thought he did. A glow on the horizon. Orange, unnatural, too stable to be lightning, too warm to be distant headlights. He pressed down on the accelerator. As he approached, the glow sharpened through the rain. A building stood in the distance, tall and angular, with a metal roof and wide floodlights shining across the muddy ground. The closer he got, the more his stomach twisted. It wasn't a barn. It was a facility. Fences surrounded it, topped with barbed wire. Security cameras blinked in the rain. The entrance gate was slightly open, swaying with the wind as if someone had passed through moments ago. He parked the truck far enough away not to be noticed and stepped out quietly. The wind whipped his coat, carrying the smell of wet dirt and something metallic, something that reminded him of that underground chamber 2 months earlier. He approached the gate. A single word was burned into the metal surface with a welding torch. Deep and deliberate. Welcome. His fingers tightened around his gun. He moved forward. The inside yard was silent, except for the wind, rattling loose sheets of metal along the outer walls. A trail of wet footprints stretched across the concrete, leading toward the main entrance. They were fresh, barefoot, human, but too large. He crouched, studying them under the beam of his flashlight. The spacing between steps was wrong, too far apart for an ordinary stride, as though whoever made them walked with unnatural height or unnatural force. His breath fogged in the cold air as he followed. The facility doors opened with a slow groan. Aaron stepped into an unlit hallway that smelled of dust, chemicals, and something faintly rancid. The floor was pristine, recently mopped, the walls lined with medical-grade stainless steel panels. His flashlight reflected off them, casting stretched shadows that rippled as he moved. Every 20 feet, a door stood on either side. Some were locked. Some were open. He checked the first open one. A lab-dot rows of vials filled a refrigerated wall unit. Charts and notebooks covered the counters. Microscopes, centrifuges, and surgical instruments gleamed under his light. But the strangest thing was pinned to an enormous corkboard, the faces of the 37 rescued men. Their names, their blood types, their genetic markers, their progress notes. Progress, as if they were plants, or livestock, or something evolving. His hand shook slightly as he flipped through one of the binders. The Pike Sisters had maintained meticulous details on every subject reactions to compounds, neurological changes, bone density anomalies, brain scans. And at the bottom of the newest page was a chilling sentence. Subject recovery slower than anticipated. Mutation incomplete. Reintegration required. He stepped back. They wanted the men back. A metallic clatter echoed from the hallway, distant but heavy. He drew his weapon and moved forward cautiously, clearing each doorway as he passed. One room held shattered glass and overturned chairs. Another contained rows of tanks filled with cloudy water, shapes floating inside limbs, organs, preserved specimens of things not found in medical books. He swallowed hard and kept going. Then he reached the central chamber. The door was ajar. Light spilled out, flickering like an unstable bulb. Aaron pushed the door with the barrel of his gun and stepped inside. It was massive. The chamber stretched 3 stories high, pipes weaving in and out of the walls like veins. Platforms circled the perimeter, connected by graded staircases. On the far end of the room, something enormous hung suspended from metal cables, a cocoon-like structure, dripping with thick, dark fluid. Wires fed into it, machines monitoring whatever pulsed inside its walls. He moved closer. The cocoon twitched. He froze. Light flashed behind him. He spun around, gun raised. The Pike Sisters stood at the upper platform, looking down at him with the same cold, ageless faces from the photograph. Miriam stepped forward first, her hand gliding along the railing. "Detective Cole," she said, voice echoing. "You're right on time." His breath steadied. "It's over. Whatever this is, it ends tonight." Agatha's smile was slow and eerie. "Ends? No, detective. It begins. Everything we did before was merely preparation." "For what?" He shouted. "For survival," Miriam whispered. "For evolution. For the next stage of humanity. These men were chosen because their bodies could adapt. Yours, however," her eyes gleamed with something almost adoring. "Yours is something special." The cocoon behind him throbbed. A deep, wet crack echoed through the chamber. Aaron whipped around just as a tear ripped down the cocoon's side. A hand, misshapen, veined, powerful, forced its way through the membrane, clawing at the air. The cables trembled. The machines screeched with overload warnings. Aaron aimed at the cocoon, but Agatha's scream echoed from above. "Don't shoot it. You'll only make it stronger." He fired anyway. The bullet ripped into the pulsing mass. A roar erupted from inside, deep, animalistic, furious. The cocoon split open completely, spilling black fluid across the floor. Something emerged, something tall, far taller than any human, its limbs elongated, its skin pale and stretched like wet parchment over bulging muscle. It had no eyes, only slits that pulsed with deep, rhythmic vibrations. The creature dropped to the floor, shaking the chamber. Aaron ran. The monster lunged, tearing through metal as easily as paper. Aaron dove behind a workstation, bullets flying from his gun, but barely slowing the thing. The Pike Sisters watched from above, thrilled, delighted, almost worshipful. Miriam whispered, "See how beautifully it adapts." Agatha answered, "He will be perfect." The creature slammed into the workstation, sending Aaron rolling across the floor. His ribs screamed in pain. He crawled toward a staircase, forced himself up, and raced along the upper platform. The monster leaped, slamming into the railing inches behind him. Metal cracked under its weight. Aaron spotted a red emergency lever attached to the main power grid. Without hesitating, he pulled it. Sparks roared. Machinery overloaded. The cable suspending the cocoon rig collapsed, crashing onto the creature and pinning one of its legs. It roared in fury, thrashing wildly. The sisters screamed, not in fear, but in anguish, as though witnessing their child being harmed. "No," Agatha shrieked. "He is the future." Aaron grabbed a fallen steel bar and vaulted down onto the creature. Using every ounce of strength he had left, he forced the bar deeper into the machinery, trapping it further. The monster lunged, claws scraping his shoulder, tearing through his coat. Blood spilled warm down his arm. He drove the bar deeper. The creature wailed a long, shuddering, unnatural cry. The floor beneath them cracked. Pipes burst, sending boiling steam across the chamber. The lights exploded, plunging everything into darkness. He heard the sisters screaming his name, furious, echoing, enraged, and then the entire platform gave way. Aaron hit the ground hard. Dust settled slowly. Silence followed. His lungs burned. His vision throbbed with floating sparks. He clawed his way across the floor, searching for any sign of the sisters or the creature. But there was nothing. Only rubble. Only darkness. Only the faint hiss of dying machines. He staggered outside into the cold night air, collapsing onto the wet grass as rain washed the blood from his skin. The facility behind him groaned, walls sinking inward, floors collapsing under the pressure of its own destruction. Backup arrived minutes later. They pulled him to safety as the facility caved in completely, burying whatever horrors lay inside. But even as Aaron watched it crumble, he knew something with absolute certainty. The Pike Sisters weren't dead. The monster wasn't gone. Not completely. The storm's wind carried a final whisper, so faint he wasn't sure it was real. 36 more. Aaron closed his eyes, breath trembling, knowing this wasn't a victory. It was a warning. And the nightmare was far from over.